Vince Rountree, welcome to the Health Coaches Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on, Howie Jacobson.
Oh, a pleasure. Always fun to talk to you.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah. So first of all, let's you're a health coach. You've got let's do like a 3 minute of your story so that to kind of frame the conversation a little bit.
All right. So my undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering. I worked in corporate America in engineering, then in marketing and sales for a large company. Everything kind of started to make a change back in 2011 when I went in for a regular physical, and doctor told me I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and I was given a prescription for the cholesterol meds. And I got the prescription, and I just thought about my grandmother, because my grandmother had high blood pressure, high cholesterol. She went on pills, and I watched her die of a heart attack. And then I had an uncle, my Uncle Peg. I saw him, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. He went on pills. He had a heart attack, died. And so now I'm sitting in front of a doctor that's telling me I got high blood pressure, telling me I got high cholesterol and take the pills. And so I said, well, I've seen this movie before. This, I know how it's going to end. The pills do not save your life. And I asked my doctor, well, is there anything that I can do other than take the pills? And he says it runs in your family. That part he was right about. So there's nothing you can do. That part I didn't accept. And so I started looking, went home and started looking on the internet. How can you eat in order to lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol, stop heart disease? And came across Esselstyn's information, and I could not believe my ears. And I was agnostic. I didn't have a proclivity to plant-based or to keto or to South. I didn't care. I just wanted to know who had data, and everybody had fluff. But Esselstyn had data. And when I saw what happened to people he put on plant-based, I was like, well, I got to try this. So I went 100%. It was August 5th, 2011. I stopped eating all animal products and just started eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. And in 6 weeks, my cholesterol dropped over 100 points. Went from 240 down to 132. Blood pressure dropped 30 points, and I lost 20 pounds. And I just have never looked back since. People in the office that laughed at me, and literally some people laughed at me that, oh, it'll never work. And, you're crazy. And because I was known to eat a lot, and I was trying to fly under the radar. That was stupid. You can't. That was just stupid, right? The first lunch where they bring in this great big old pizza and a salad, and I don't have a single slice of pizza on my plate. I just have a big plate of salad, and they're like, Vince, what the heck are you doing? So, yeah, I couldn't fly under the radar. And then people was like, they literally laughed at me. But then when they saw the results, some people came back to me and said, hey, you think this will work for me? And I started helping people, and lo and behold, it worked. So eventually I left corporate America, and here I am.
Okay, cool. And so what was your journey to becoming a health coach? Like, people came to you, and at first it's like, here, just do this, do what I did. And you gradually gained skills and protocols and techniques to help people. So what was that journey?
So in the beginning, it was just, the results were so overwhelming that people were coming to me saying, hey, I heard that you're not on cholesterol pills. And it was a friend of mine that had high blood pressure. And I said, based on what I've read, this works. I mean, and what I've done. And so what bothered me was I felt like I needed to know more. So I did T. Colin Campbell's training, and I don't know anybody in our space that hasn't. Esselstyn actually had a training through the Cleveland Clinic, and I did that. I'm in Atlanta, and Emory has a health coaching training on behavior change. I went through that, and I just want to keep learning and learning and learning and learning, because what bothered me was when people would ask me questions that I couldn't answer. And so what has happened over the years is that the way I think that I communicate, I'm very animated and I get excited easy, and I really didn't have an idea how much that impacts other people. And with many people, it does. But there's some people that it doesn't. And so what I learned in health coaching is, just the science behind asking questions and reflective listening and all of the amazing things that you teach in your class and and I don't want to badmouth Emory's program because it's a very good program, but what you teach is better. I mean, anybody that wants, what you do is just better. It just is.
Thank you.
But it's solid stuff, man. I have just so much respect for you and your breadth of knowledge. So I just, the thing, what's so fascinating as a coach is every client that comes to you is different. There's a lot of things that are similar, but then and some people just come to you and they've already made the decision to go plant-based. They just don't know how, and those people are easy. That to me, that's really not even health coaching. I'm just feeding you the information that you need, and then they go do it, and that's changed. That's not health coaching, right? Health coaching is like, I want to quit smoking, and smoking is addictive. So what do? Well, I want to quit cheeseburgers, and I want to quit. And so how do I do that? And dealing with the fact that you clearly don't want to do it, and you're pulled in that direction, but you need to do it. That's where the challenge comes in.
Great.
That's where the challenge comes in.
Yeah. So, in under normal circumstances, in a sort of happy world, I would just be talking to you today about health coaching and about your approach. But we're but to be right, you know where I'm going.
I got an idea.
Partly we're talking today because you're a black man. And I have been reflecting on my coaching over the years and looking at the organizations I've been a part of, and they tend to be lily white. And with, the racial justice movement really picking up steam with people, like Ibram Kendi's books and Robin DiAngelo's books and Michelle Alexander's book as, bestsellers, all of a sudden white people are waking up to like, oh, this is real. And I might have been part of the problem. And so I want to talk to you, pick your brain about, so when we're working with clients of color, what are the mistakes and the pitfalls? And I just want to begin by giving you a couple of my own. One of them is that I have noticed that when I work with a client and they're African American, that there is an assumption somewhere in my brain like, oh, they probably don't have a lot of money. and I can't, it's embarrassed. It's so embarrassing to say, but it's like, oh, should I tell them about the air fryer? Or something like that. Another thing is, and so that's sort of overt implicit racism.
That's exactly what it is. That is exactly what it is. And it's not your fault. It is almost impossible to be born and raised in America and not have some degree of implicit racism. It's almost impossible. I'd mentioned to you the teachings of Jane Elliott. I think listening to a YouTube talk or interview with Jane Elliott should be a required session for every white person in America. I've oftentimes tried to figure out what made this country different. There was slavery in Brazil. There was slavery in Puerto Rico. There was slavery in in Jamaica. There was slavery in so many different countries, but they didn't carry on the racism. And so what happened here has been going on. The change of blacks and whites didn't end in slavery. As a matter of fact, the 13th Amendment has an exception. Slavery as we know it ended, but a form of slavery has not ended. Because if you read the 13th Amendment says, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's something like in slavery and indentured servitude, with the exception of criminality or criminal behavior or something like that. Mm-hmm. There's an exception to the 13th Amendment. Think about that. So that means, so if there's an exception, that means, okay, well, with that, in that case, it hasn't ended. And that is not trivial, because long after slavery, some people figured out, oh, well, then all we got to do is, realize that, black persons, did some crime, and people were hired. There were fake police people that were hired just to find something that a black person did wrong, put them in jail, and then make them work the fields. Mm-hmm. And there were hundreds of thousands of black people that affected. And think about that, right? I mean, that's not a trivial thing. Redlining in school districts. My parents moved to New Jersey. I was born and raised in New Jersey, and my parents moved to New Jersey in the 60s. And
whereabouts?
Plainfield. I grew up in Plainfield, New Jersey.
Okay.
And
did you know that I grew up in South Orange?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we used to run track in Plainfield.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow. No, I didn't know that. And my brother was on the track team. My brother ran cross country and indoor and outdoor, actually. And my sister did as well. So
well, depending on their ages, I'm sure they both beat me.
Yeah, well, my sister was the best athlete in the family. My sister, when she was in high school, she set she was on a mile relay team that set a national record. So I always brag on my sister. Wow. She's amazing, and she's still a really good runner. But when my parents went to get an apartment, they told me they couldn't get an apartment. They would call and say, "Hey, you realize I see an ad in the paper. You've got an apartment. Oh yeah, we've got a place. Come on over." They would go there. They would look at them and say, "Oh man, we just got rid of that apartment. Somebody just came and took it." Looked in the paper, called someplace else. Call. Yeah, we got an apartment available. Get there. Oh, it's taken. And
like I'm feeling like I'm really learning about this late in life, right? Like I had some inklings, but not like, certainly didn't learn it in school. Mm-hmm. Didn't learn it in the job market, didn't mm-hmm. notice that I was the beneficiary of a very uneven system. Now I'm a health coach, and I'm starting to wake up to this. So one thing I could do, I think it's useful for me to go inside and say, well, what are the biases that I'm feeling? There's also a part of me that wants to collapse into some sort of guilt and absolution, and almost like pretend that there's no difference. Like if I was working with someone of Italian descent, or like I work with Josh Lajani, we talk about their background. We say, Josh, oh, New Orleans, all the po' boys and the muffaladas, and someone Italian, oh, Granny making the thing. But it's almost like I'm afraid to talk to black people about their grandparents, because it feels like stereotyping, like what did they eat? Or, like there's almost kid gloves. So could you talk a little bit about like what should white coaches know to be effective when working with black people?
Well, I think white coaches should watch Jane Elliott.
Okay. Can you say something? You mentioned her name, but you didn't talk about like what she does or.
So Jane Elliott, when she in 1968, when Martin Luther King was killed, she was teaching a third grade class, and she realized, and she was trying to explain, who Martin Luther King was. And in her explanation, she realized that the kids had, didn't understand racism, and so what she did, and third grade class, I mean, that's fine. And so she started an experiment then. I mean, so she's been at this for a very long time, where she separated kids based on their eye color.
And this is all white kids, right?
Yes.
And Jane Elliott's a white lady.
That's right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah. And so she separated the kids in her class based on the eye color. And kids that had brown eyes, she praised them and treated them great. Kids that had blue eyes, she talked down to them and didn't, and then just watched what happened to their behavior. It's phenomenal. And so she did it on Oprah. And I think that's where she probably got the biggest fame, is that she worked with Oprah, and what they did, the audience had no idea what was going on, but this was planned well in advance. And as the studio audience was lining up to come into the studio, they separated the audience based on blue eyes and brown eyes. They treated the brown-eyed people great. They made the blue-eyed people stand in long lines, and they just they gave the privileges to the brown eyes and then during the show, they started talking about it, and you see the blue-eyed people stand up and say, "But that wasn't fair. I wasn't treated right. I didn't have a chance." And you just listen to these people talk. I'm like, oh my God. And
this is after 20 minutes, right? We're not talking about 400 years.
Exactly. And it just becomes so enlightening. If you look at what's on, television depictions, education is critical, right? And public education depends on where you live. And till this day, right, poorer areas that have poorer schools, that lead to poorer jobs, that lead to poor economic outcomes, which leads you back to their kids back to the poorer neighborhoods that have poor education. And so when you go back to governmental redlining, where it is impossible for somebody Black to live in the areas that have the higher educations, you have an upward spiral and a downward spiral that's got nothing to do with talent. That's got nothing to do with intellect. That's got nothing to do with who you are. You just don't have a chance. And most white people in America don't have a clue that that this has been going on and for such a long period of time. Just the Tuskegee experiment.
Right. So, but I want to bring this back though to health coaches.
Okay.
Because there's a way in which I'm taking in what you're saying, feeling it very powerfully, and it partly it makes me want to feel guilty, right? Which is, and it's okay to feel guilty for a short time if it leads to positive action. But, part of me feels like, oh, I just want you to like me again, right? So I want to apologize. But when we're working with people of color, right, you're talking about really, really deep social programming. First, I guess. So I think I'm asking a question that comes later. So I guess the first question is, what do we want white coaches to know and understand about themselves, so that they can, right? Because this is a horrific history, and we're both implicated in on different sides, and so to be honest, part of me, especially reading the things I've been reading, James Baldwin and Ibram Kendi and Malcolm X and the speeches of Martin Luther King and all this stuff, part of me, like whenever I see a black person, I'm like, why do you just want equality and not revenge? I don't understand it.
That is a great question. The fact that you are cognizant of that, the fact that you have made a concerted effort to learn more, the fact that you are well aware and have a thirst for knowledge separates you. And if more people could follow the path that you're on and understand, the better. And I think that the thing as a coach is to keep in mind is to understand the history, and keep that in mind, because it's always there. It's there when you don't know it's there. Walking around feeling guilty is not helping anybody, right? I understand, that the history of oppression, that takes place still to this day in voter suppression. We can talk about that later. But just the understanding of that, nobody wants to feel, your pity. Just treat me like a man and respect me as your equal. Just respect me as your equal. Know that, we've had a 100-meter race and you had a 50-meter head start, right? And just know that, and then treat me like a man.
So I'm not sure if you can answer this from the point of view of a client, but like, what are there things that you think that that clients of health, black clients of health coaching feel that, are there things that they feel like are inappropriate or mistakes or uncomfortable?
That's a tough one. Again, because everybody's different, boy, as a client.
Well, let me ask you a specific question.
Okay.
Maybe I can make it easier. So we know that stress has a huge impact on health, and it has a huge impact on health behaviors.
Sure.
And like the triggers for this mass uprising now have been, publicly videoed and shared murders of black people by police and vigilantes. Mm-hmm. And one thing I'm coming to understand is that black people are under a kind of stress that white mm-hmm. people aren't. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm trying to help somebody with stress, like, how does that play in? Do I raise it? Right? Like, how am I skillful in acknowledging that there is a group of people who are under a form of stress, or I'm assuming under a form of stress that I don't understand, and the particular person of color that I'm talking to may or may not feel it, associate with it, acknowledge it. Like, I don't want to impose my politics on someone. There are black Republicans. There are black, Tim Scott is a black senator from South Carolina. And like, to respect him as a man is not like I want him to be as radical as me about black liberation.
Yeah. I don't understand that, but yes, I acknowledge Tim Scott. I don't know how he does his job. I get it.
Right. But as a health coach, it's not my job to politicize anybody.
That's right. That's exactly right. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. That's really a tough one. I think that, well, as a coach, we're asking a lot of questions to try to get at the true motivation of people, right? I mean, our job is to ask questions open-ended questions and to be reflective and to kind of see what's driving. No judgment is a part of our protocol, right? I mean, no judgment. So that's a part of our training, and that is a part of our being. I think just in general, I think that becomes even more important when a white person is coaching a black person. And I think that, you made the point of the fact that we've been treated differently and the stresses and the stress levels involved. And that is true. I mean, I just, I didn't realize that that many white people don't get the same feeling of terror when they see a police cars, flashing lights in their rear view mirror. I mean, obviously you don't feel good about it, but I almost have a panic attack. I'm like, oh man, I hope I'm not going to lose my life. That's the you probably don't feel that way when obviously you're like, you got to get a ticket, you may get a speeding ticket or whatever. And that's going to disrupt your life.
Yeah. My trauma about the cops is daddy issues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, whenever I see the, it's literally terror. So just understand that's just, there's a difference.
Yeah. So I want to follow up with that. So like as you said, I just wrote down, like, we want to be asking questions, be reflective, what's driving them, a no judgment zone. And so you and I have been friends for a long time. We've never had a conversation about race before.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to ask nicely a few times to get you to do this. So one of the things that occurs to me is that as a coach, if I'm not skillful and aware, and I'm coaching you as a black person, there are things you're not willing to tell me because you don't think I'll understand, or you think my feelings will be hurt. Does that seem fair?
It is very fair. And that is very true. That is very true. That is very true. And I would say, there certainly are people that will not be as reluctant to have this conversation as I am. I just,
Well, I think that makes you a good person to have the conversation.
Yeah, I'm very reluctant because well, first of all, I just think the definition of racism should be changed. I think that because in my kind of definition of racism, it's almost impossible. I would say it's almost impossible to be born and raised in this country and not have some degree of racism. It's almost impossible because it's just every place. And you may or may not know it. Most people don't know it.
Right. Well, it's like high blood pressure.
That's exactly right. You can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't taste it, but you got it.
Yeah, and almost everybody's got it, and it's produced. It's not your fault until you learn about it, and then you can take responsibility.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's not your fault because it has been imposed on you within everything that you see, touch, feel, taste, and hear. And when you it's been amazing the last 3-4 weeks to watch white America realize this that quickly. That's like I never would have dreamed that so many people would have realized so much so fast. And understand that we're not talking in the past, and we're not talking the systemic in the past, right? I mean, if you look at slavery being abolished in 1865, but the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, and in 2013, the Supreme Court just removed sections 4 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And certain states immediately, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, immediately made changes to make it easier for voter suppression. This is today, right? I mean, we're not talking history. We're talking
Right.
history and till today. But anyway,
Right.
we got to come back to coaching.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, like the way you know what you're saying, it brings up emotion, it brings up anger, uh, and so for white people to be able to hear that, to know that the high blood pressure of racism is inside us, and to not feel like we are defined by it. Like if you tell me I have high blood pressure and then I tell you no I don't, right? like like you've attacked me or something like that,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. So like what makes me trustworthy to work with a black client so that they can feel like, okay, I can be open with you because like I was a school teacher many years ago, and there was a biracial family, white mom, black dad, who had two kids in the school, and one like I can't remember what exactly the situation was, but the older boy was acting out quite a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
he was tall, so
Mm-hmm.
tall blackish black man
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
in eighth grade, like
Uh-huh.
all right, like already like, and we had a parent teacher conference with the family, like what's going on with him, and it's like no, everything's fine at home, but he saw his dad get manhandled by police, he's got a lot of rage, and one of the teachers, very sweet older white guy, was like, after the parents left, he says like, do we really believe that's what happened? Like it didn't sound right, like that's not how police act. Right. And I was like, gee, I don't know. you
Yeah.
know so like in that case, the school was not being worthy of trust for this family. And so as I'm thinking about that, like as a coach, how do I take the first step? Because one of the things we do as coaches is we take the first step. We ask vulnerable questions, we show ourselves, we lead.
Mm-hmm.
How do I lead so that a person of color who's being coached by me feels comfortable to tell me what's going on like it is?
Well, in the example of the school, what the school demonstrated is, or the person that said that anyway, demonstrated the problem, and that is the level of ignorance. And that's almost like the blood pressure example. He's racist, the person that said that, and just doesn't know it. He just doesn't know it. Doesn't know that the police treat black people differently. A lot of them, not all of them, not all of them. Most of them have, all of them have an implicit bias, but they're not all bad, for lack of a better word. But I think that just recognizing that we've had a different journey. Your question of how do I lead? The journey is different, and you have taken the initiative to better understand the journey better than most. And I can't think of a specific way to answer your question, but in general, the way to answer the question is the deeper your level of understanding, the more that it'll come out in certain situations.
So you're saying it's less about what to do and more about how to be.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Gosh, that's why I like listening to your podcast, because you summarize things so well. That's exactly what I'm saying. And
it's not about the techniques that I use in the coaching situation. It's who I turn myself into through education, introspection, encounters like this, and healing work.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Because based on that, you will conduct yourself differently. and compare that to the person in the school that said, come on now, you know, the police don't really treat people that way. Those are two different beings, right? I mean, those are two totally different experiences. That coach would ask different questions than you would who have been through that level of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, that in some ways makes it much harder, of course.
Yeah.
Because I would rather you just tell me the words to say.
Well,
right. But it's also much simpler.
Yeah.
Right. So it sounds like it's about right. If coaching is largely about empathy, then if we are all just individuals and there's no context of society and race, then I can just be curious about you as an individual. But given that there are all these striations and hierarchies, it's my job to become curious about your people's experience into which you were born and have grown from.
Yes. That's it. No, that's it. And understand that how much of that still exists till today. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I just am amazed at how far we've come in 3 weeks. I think that the George Floyd murder was so horrific. And I think the fact that it happened during a global pandemic when a lot of us were shut in and watching TV, I think the combination of it not being a normal time when everybody's out and about running around doing their thing, we weren't, it wasn't normal times when it happened. And it was so long, if you start your stopwatch and just sit in silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and I would encourage everybody to do that. Start a stopwatch and be quiet for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And you realize this man's knee was on his neck for that long and he died, and the guy kept his knee on his neck for another 2 minutes and 53 seconds of him being dead. And a couple other cops were just right next to him doing nothing. And this is today. When we say white privilege, it's not, we don't, we're not, it's easy to think, no, I don't have any privilege. I came up on my own and I had to go to school and I had to fight for my, yes, you did. I didn't say it was going to be easy. All I'm saying is that the system is against us, and it always has been, for as long as we've been in this country. So you have to understand that.
So I got one more question for you, and it's making me nervous for a funny reason, which is, so I want to know, if I have undiagnosed high blood pressure, there's a way I can find out, right? There's a cuff I can put on, and I'm nervous because I don't know how to pronounce it. The I've never been able to say that fucking word. Sphygmomanometer. But so if I have undiagnosed systemic racist implicit biases in me and I'm coaching a person of color, are there clues that I can, if I'm just by myself, I'm perfect, I don't have any biases. But when I'm interacting with the world, I can start to see things, I'm getting certain reactions, right? Is there ways that I can tell as a coach that I have work to do?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'm sure this exists. But I've never heard of it because I've never heard this question before. But there's probably not like a Myers-Briggs type of test, but there's probably a racism test. I'm sure somebody smarter than me has come out with it.
Well,
It just
well
said
there's the implicit bias tests, which I think you can search online and take.
that's what I'm saying. And because if you take that, I haven't heard of it. I can't like refer to it like the disc test or something like that. But that if you answer and then you look at the results, somebody can look at that and say, yeah, you have this, right? You have this. But if you have the desire to take the test, you probably already have it.
Right, but it's just in terms of like interactions. Like if I'm not sure whether I'm acting in a way that's elicits trust. Right, like how are there ways in which I can sort of sense from, like if I say something stupid, I'll see in your face that you think I was a little bit off there.
Yeah.
Right. But if I've said something that is either, implicitly racist or overtly racist, or shows that I don't understand, or tells you that it's not safe to be level with me, are there reactions that I would I could look for to know I have work to do?
It depends on the person, because if it happened with me, I think I'd be poker face enough where you wouldn't know it, unless it were from you and I feel good enough with you where I probably would tell you, hey, this wasn't right and why, right? But I would have to be feel pretty close to you in order to do that. Without the history, I'd be pretty poker faced about it, and then I would talk shit about you afterwards. But
right. Go find a better coach.
Yeah, right. But some people, that's my way, right? There's other people that are more comfortable, in the state of conflict and saying, hey, you went over the line and here's why. So that's really tough because it depends on the client.
Right. So I think there's and it's also tough because in the coaching relationship, our clients tend to not want to be in conflict with us. Right. So I'm a little concerned that they're going to swallow a lot and just like, okay, just another one of those guys. I'll see what I can get, but I'm not going deep.
Yeah.
To think about if there are ways as coaches that we can make an approach and say, like, is it okay to acknowledge, hey, I'm white and you're black? In a coaching, like I'm wondering if there's things I'm missing.
I don't think that would help. I think acknowledging the implicit racism might.
So what would that sound like?
Man, that's a good question. I think that, boy, that's a good one. It may sound something like, I just want to let you know that I acknowledge that I have had benefits and privileges being a white man in America that you haven't had. And I empathize with your journey. And I recognize there's some things that I don't know. And I want to keep and I want to keep the door open such that if there is anything that you feel I need to know, please share with me, because we've had different journeys. And I want to be respectful for yours. And I know that the system has been against you, and I want to be for you.
That is really beautiful. That really touched me. And it's part of, like, one of our coaching superpowers is vulnerability. Right? Like around it, whatever. And it sounds like when I heard those words, it was like, oh, this is how I signal trustworthiness. Not by saying, I know what your experience is like, but I don't know what your experience is like, and I acknowledge that mine has been different, and I'm open.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
I had no idea we would get there. I had no idea we would get there, but we actually got something maybe meaningful out of this last 3 minutes.
Well, it's a hard topic. If we knew the answer when we started, we wouldn't have had to have the conversation.
Very typical to the coaching experience, right?
Right. So some things are not tweets; they're long podcasts.
Right.
So thank you, man. I really appreciate your willingness to jump in on this.
Well, thank you for asking me, Howard. Yes, it's not something I talk about a whole lot, but if there's anyone I'm having the conversation with, it's you, because I just got a ton of respect for you.
Well, right back at you. Tell folks how they can find you if they want to work with you.
Well, you can find me at foodnotpills.com, foodnotpills.com.
Oh, I love that. Is that a new one?
That one is one that starts my application, so you can they can put an email in there and actually fill out an application and put time on. So that's one. I'm on Facebook at Vince Rountree. There's no D in the Rountree, and yeah, and let's see, lower BP now. I've got a free book on blood pressure.
Okay.
On how to lower your blood pressure with food.
Cool. I'll put all these in the show notes, and I have one more request from you. For you.
Okay. All right.
As I said at the beginning, this is for this new podcast that I'm doing for health coaches. I'd like to share it on Plant Yourself as well. Would that be okay?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You. All right, Vince Rountree. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all this and for being open to the conversation and for being both, like, I love the balance of, like, your passion, where you feel the anger, and where you're clearly expressing love as well. It's an inspiring combination, and if I had a hat, I'd take it off to you.
I appreciate that, Howard. Again, and it's always a pleasure. I'm glad you thought of me and thought that I'd be an appropriate person to broach this topic, even though I was very uncomfortable in doing so. But that's okay. I understand you can't run from being uncomfortable, so it's all good.
Right, and someday soon, I hope to have you on the Health Coaches podcast just to talk about health coaching.
I'd love that. Yeah, no, I'd love that.
As soon as we fix the world. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, man. Take care, Vince. Thank you so much.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.